welcome back to another episode of the RevRx podcast, where we discuss how to thrive in faith, family, and health. My name is Chad Potts, and I'm your host. Today, I'm so excited to bring you a very special guest, one that I have been looking forward to for quite a while. His name is Joe Lample. He's the Joe behind Joe Gardener, and Joe is a fantastic resource when it comes to all things gardening. Gardening is one of the hobbies that I've picked up over the last several years, and I absolutely love it. There's something really empowering about growing your own food and looking down at your plate and realizing that you had a hand in bringing that to the table for your family. Now, Joe is a podcaster as well. He's also the creator and producer of the show Growing a Greener World. This show is now an Emmy award-winning national series on public television. You're going to love everything that Joe has to tell us today. If you're at all interested in gardening, or if you just want to learn some life lessons from the garden, this episode is for you. So sit back, relax, get those gardening gloves out. I introduce you to my friend, Joe Lample. Today, we have a very special guest, Joe Lample, a.k.a. Joe Gardener, the Joe Gardener. Thank you so much, Joe, for being on the RevRx podcast with us today.
Thank you, Chad, for having me. I've been looking forward to this, and I always love to talk about gardening. And considering you are a fellow gardener and student, I can't wait to dialogue with you.
Yeah, me too. This one's been earmarked on my calendar for a while. So one of the things I told you, Joe, beforehand, and I'll share this with my listeners too, I love gardening. Gardening it's relaxing for me. I tell people, I say it's cheaper than therapy. Sometimes I wonder.
Yeah.
It becomes just like any other hobby. You can spend what you want to.
Exactly.
But there's something relaxing about getting in the garden. It runs in my blood. My grandfather was a big gardener. And I like to tell people my grandfather and Joe Gardener taught me everything I know about gardening. And so,
blushing.
So, pressure, Joe. I think highly of you, and just so thrilled to have you here today. But,
well, thank you. I hope I don't disappoint. You raised the bar very high.
Yeah, well, you're up to it. I know. One of the things I'd like to ask you is, what sparked your interest in gardening? Mine started with my grandfather, who kind of forced me into the garden.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm glad he did, because I learned to love it. But what sparked your interest in gardening?
You raised a good point there. I've heard a lot of people's origin stories on how they became a gardener. And a lot of times it's not something that they intentionally started out to do. I think it was an accidental encounter or a forced event.
Yeah.
In my case, it was an accident. I'm the youngest of four brothers, or four boys. I was the youngest. And my next oldest brother is 5 years older than me. So when I was 8 years old, which is when I discovered my love of gardening, he's 13 and he's out with his buddies and they're running the town ragged, and I'm out there, thankfully, had dad all to myself.
Yeah.
He was the 9 to 5 or the 8 to 5 guy with his suit and tie during the week, working his job. But on the weekends, he had to get it all done around the house. He was the weekend warrior, working outside, mowing the grass, trimming the bushes, edging the driveway, all of that. I had nothing to do, but I loved that I had dad to myself. So I would follow him throughout the yard all day, every Saturday.
I love that.
And then one of those days, he finished around 3:00 or so, mid-afternoon. He was done. He was going to go watch some football or something. I had some energy in me. I'm running around and I accidentally ran by one of the plants he had just finished working on, and I broke a side branch accidentally. I broke a branch from it, and oh no, now what?
He's gonna kill me. Yeah.
Well, part of me thinks that, but I also know better because he's the kindest, gentlest man there is. But I didn't want to disappoint him.
Yeah.
So I, not knowing what to do, I covered my tracks. Basically, I stuck the branch into the ground right by the base and put soil around it, and went about my business. And I kind of forgot about it. I actually did, but 2 months or so later, I was in the same area, and it jogged my memory that, oh yeah, there was that broken branch here. I better make sure he doesn't find it before I better find it before he does, because he's going to see that it's dead. But I couldn't find a dead branch because I assumed it, why would it live? I broke it.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't find a dead branch. But what I did find was the branch that I think I stuck in the ground, except that this now had leaves coming out of it, and it was developing roots because I tugged on it a little bit. I'm like, what? And it was definitely the branch. And I'm like, how does this happen? New leaves, roots. And I'm telling you, that set me on my course for the rest of my life.
Wow, that's
So
so cool.
I didn't plan on becoming a gardener that day, but that day had plans for me to be a gardener for the rest of my life.
Yeah, yeah. And I love a lot of the lessons that we get from the garden. And it's things like that that just make you see how wonderfully this world's put together.
Yeah.
And really how truly great nature is and can be. But if we don't have that exposure, then a lot of times we take it for granted. And so I love that story.
It's easy to take it for granted because a lot of times we live in a bubble, and too often we don't get outside to experience it. We can look through our windows from our climate controlled house and our air conditioned car, and we don't rarely get our hands in the soil, but it takes that close encounter, I believe, or that aha moment, whatever that may be.
Sure, sure. And there's something just, I don't know, call it primal, about putting your hands in the dirt and working the ground and
Yeah.
growing food. I mean, it just seems like that there's something that's innate within a lot of us that really that scratches our itch, so to speak.
I think it's innate in all of us.
Yeah,
We're all made of carbon, and we all basically have the same living biology that requires air and water and protein, and so we have more in common than I think we give ourselves credit for, even down to the smallest microorganisms, really.
Yeah.
Because we're just a big collection of microorganisms.
Absolutely.
But I do think that if we're lucky, we discover that connection, and then we do something with it. Like you and I were talking before we started recording about how empowering we feel and how fulfilling it is to know that we had a hand in the food on our plate.
Yeah.
And you know how good that feels, and I know how good that feels, and I'm afraid that not enough people know how good that feels.
That's right. And that's why I wanted to do this, because I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of power in realizing what you're capable of doing. And, a lot of people just eat food from the grocery store. It reminds me of an old joke, I think it was a kid, and, where does food come from? He's like, well, it comes from the grocery store.
Yeah.
Not realizing that, like you said, we're in this bubble, but yeah, really, there's a lot of pride that comes in that. And, I've shared with my family, I shared with you before we logged on here. There's times I look down, I'm like, I had a hand in everything on my plate, whether it be the venison that I harvested or the vegetables that I grew and, the potatoes or whatever the case is. There's times where I look down, I'm like, man, every bit of this came from my hands.
I've said the same thing.
And my kids aren't nearly as enthralled in that. They're not as impressed as I am.
Well, let me just say there, I know what you mean there, but I have noticed, because my two daughters they're not gardeners, but they do notice the quality of the food, the difference in the taste and the texture of what comes out of our gardens.
Yeah, 100%.
And if that's what comes of it, so be it. But they noticed it, and I think they have more respect for what we're doing as the providers of that.
Sure. I want to ask you a couple questions selfishly, if that's okay.
That's right.
What's your favorite plant to grow? What's your favorite, I'll just say plant. What's your favorite plant to grow? Put you on the spot.
You often hear people when they say, what's your favorite X? And then they say, well, that's like trying to pick my favorite kid.
Right.
I'm struggling because I'm not sure I have a favorite, because I love growing stuff. I love everything is a little bit different, even within the vegetable garden. There's nuances to everything that you grow. And I like the diversity. I like the challenge. I like that it's not all the same. I like that some things flower, some things fruit, some things die, some things, take off. It's not the one thing, it's the everything. And,
Wow.
and the lesson from each of those things in the group of everything.
That's a good answer.
Thank you.
And I can really, truly appreciate that as well. I love the variety. But I've always wanted to know that. I've wanted to sit down with Joe Gardner and say, what's your favorite plant? And man, that's great.
Thank you.
Thinking about gardening, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the garden. Particularly, one that I've learned over the last several years is one of resilience. Gardening for me has been a lot of trial and error, and that's where I found you. I'm trying to make it less error and and more success, and you've helped me tremendously with that. But inevitably, that's part of gardening. But isn't that part of the beauty?
I think that's the key thing. I think if you're afraid to make mistakes, or you're afraid to get started because you think you're going to make mistakes, or you don't know enough, and so therefore you don't start, I think that's the biggest mistake. I think the only way you make progress is to screw up. And it's how we learn. As long as when that happens, because the outcome wasn't what we had hoped it to be, we try to figure out why the outcome wasn't what we hoped it to
That's
be.
right. Yeah.
And that's where the learning takes place. And so I tell people, I freely admit that I enjoy making mistakes. I look forward to making mistakes. I do not beat myself up for making a mistake, because I know everything I know probably came from a mistake,
Mhm.
or most of it. And when you experience that firsthand, there's a big difference in reading about it or seeing it on video or TV or whatever it may be, versus it happening under your own watch, because you are vested in that. And so I think the stakes are higher, and you take more of an interest in righting the wrong or fixing the mistake, so that in the future you can determine what led to that, and then even more importantly, you can apply that information to other scenarios that may not be identical, but they may be similar enough that you learn from that prior issue to apply that information to the next thing, so that you either prevent that potential mistake from happening, or you head it off, or you mitigate it,
Mhm.
or whatever. But it's a constant building of your skills and your experiences, so that every day you become a little stronger, a little better, a little smarter than the day before. And as far as I'm concerned, I hope there are a lot of mistakes ahead, because to me, one of my favorite things about gardening is that no 2 days are the same, and you're not in control,
Mm-mm.
and you're always learning. No matter what your skill level is, you're learning every day. I'm learning every day, and we're always getting better. But it really is the great equalizer amongst all humans, is that because we're not in control, we're all trying to figure it out, and
That's
just
right.
maybe at different levels. But it's
That's
a
a
great
great
common
reminder.
denominator.
Yeah, a great reminder of the fact we're not in control. And that I'm the type of person. I'm type A. I love
Mhm.
to plan and schedule and
Yeah.
prevent and all of these things. And there's something freeing about realizing that it's going to be what it is, but
You
I can
said
learn from it.
you you said there's something freeing about that,
Mhm.
that we we should not gloss over that, because I think for many type A gardeners, control freaks like
Mhm.
you and me, a lot of the stress in gardening comes from the fact that we're trying to control it.
Yeah.
And once we let go of that, gardening becomes a lot more fun, because in my prior days, when I hadn't figured that part out yet, and I just didn't think I knew enough, that I couldn't get exactly right. I couldn't get the perfect lawn. I could get a 98% close to perfect lawn, but that 2% was driving me crazy. As we age, there's something to be said for wisdom, and we mature, and
Sure.
we realize, like, you know what? I don't have to know it all. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, the pursuit of perfection with gardening, especially, or anything really, is a total waste of time. And you need to enjoy the ride and give yourself some grace.
That's right.
And when
That's
you
right.
realize that you're not in control, that's the key to giving you that freedom.
That's so good. And anything from weather. You're in Georgia as well,
Tell me about it.
and it's tough. Whether it be pests, diseases, you name it. There are all the time. It seems like challenges, but you can see them as challenges, or you can see them as something to learn, something to overcome. And you and I are a lot alike in the way we think. You're very scientifically minded, as am I. Uh, and so a lot of times you'll do trial and error experiments. You'll make a hypothesis, and you'll have a control group, and you'll have an experimental group. I've seen you do that a couple of times, and
Yeah, fun.
I've gotten to where I try to do that too. I'm like, I'm not sure the best way to do this. Let's do it two ways, and then I'll know next year. And it's not instant, is it?
No,
That's another thing I think that we can bring out that gardening is great for, is that in this world of instant expectations, it causes us to slow down and say, you know what, the results aren't going to be immediate, and that's good.
you're saying some really good things there. I'm one of the reasons I love to experiment is because it's not like flipping on a light switch and suddenly it was dark and now it's light, and why did that happen? Oh, I turned the switch on. And work that way. And it gives us a chance to go out there every day or wherever that may be and see what's happening. And it may not even be noticeable day to day,
Hmm.
but a lot of times these experiments that we do with plants take weeks. And so even if it's just noticing something from week to week to week, that's saying something.
It is.
And we can make those observations and start connecting the dots that way and seeing the direction that test is going or that experiment is going. And then we're involved in the outcome with knowledge of the progress that's been made so far, so that we can say, oh, if this is going on, then maybe this is probably going to happen. Or if it makes a turn the other way, it's like, why did that happen? So you can see, I mean, it piggybacks on what we've already talked about. It's every day. It's like, oh, what's going to happen tomorrow?
Yeah. And there's something, and I'm sure there's some explanation for this that's for greater minds than me, but there's something just, I don't know, comforting about, I'm going to use tomatoes. I've planted my tomatoes. I go out there and I touch them. The plants. Either I'm taking off some suckers, or I'm pruning, or maybe I'm flipping the flower to try to get it to pollinate a little bit or something. There's something comforting about getting out there and just getting your hands on those plants too. It's almost like you've birthed it. And I know it's a really silly explanation, but you almost feel that way when it's yours, especially if you've grown it from seed.
Well, people that have done it can relate to exactly what you said. I mean, we feel like they're parents, and there's a reason why a lot of times the seedlings and small plants are in a nursery. They're like, they need somebody to oversee it. But we do, especially when we started from seed. I mean, those are our babies, really. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. And so we have a vested interest in a stake in their outcome, and we want it to be successful. So we're out there touching it and taking care of it.
Sure. I wanted to kind of touch on the fact that gardening is not so seasonal, is it? Of course, there are seasons, and we're down here in Georgia. I feel like we just have like one season with minor fluctuations. I'm further south than you, but
yeah.
But it's one of those things where when I first started gardening, I thought, okay, gardening starts in the spring and it ends in the summer.
Yeah.
One of the things you taught me, though, is that there's something you can do year round. Can we kind of talk through that a little bit?
I would love it. A lot of people have the notion that have not gardened that there's a season for it, and it's summer. The beans, the squash, the tomatoes, the corn, the cucumbers. That's the gardening season.
Yeah, that's when you see the fruit.
Yeah, and so many people that even try it think that, okay, those are the months I'm going to do it. And the crazy thing, although those are good months for growing certain things, they're the hardest months of the year. And the humidity, the heat, the pests, the insects, the disease, everything that's hard about gardening really happens in those summer months. But that's when everybody's, dipping their toe in the water and they're like, I don't like this at all. I'm done with it. So I'm on this campaign, and I have been for years, that the biggest missed opportunity for most of the country is fall or spring, because there is a lot that you can grow that doesn't grow in the summer, is not happy in the summer, but only grows when in the cooler months on either side of summer, that are the rewards. And you kind of put up with summer to get to fall or to spring.
Yeah.
And you can grow the sweet leafy crops and all the things that just don't taste good at all or don't even grow in the summertime.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you live in a part of the country where it's too cold, so let's face it, I mean, there are some places where, once you get to September, it's kind of too late for that area, but it's not too late to be thinking about, as I often say, gardening season to me starts in the fall.
Okay. Yeah.
So it doesn't start in the spring. It starts in the season before that when you're planning. And
preparation. Yep.
You may have heard me talk about describing yourself. Are you a planner or a planter?
Mm.
And the planter is the one that hasn't planned at all, and they're reactive. They're just, okay, oh, it's middle of April, frost-free date now. Let me go to the box store and buy some plants, and I don't know what I'm going to buy, but I'll just see what's there, and then I'll stick it in the ground. I'm not sure how to grow that stuff, but we'll see how it happens. That's clearly a planter. A planner, like you and me, anticipates that time ahead with time to think and prepare. So there's no stress when we get there, because if you're not a planner and you wait until the season is upon us, it's equivalent to standing on some railroad tracks and the freight train is bearing down on you at a speed so fast you can't get out of the way. Even though the train looks like it's far off in the distance when you first get there, and it is. it gets to you faster than you realize. And then it's too late. And so being a planner, I mean, sometimes I wish that I shouldn't say it this way. Sometimes I would like an opportunity to not be able to grow something in the fall so that I had more planning time.
Sure.
Because I'm as busy in the fall, not as busy, but certainly pretty busy with my fall garden and my spring garden. So I'm not able to sit down and really plan as leisurely as I could if I didn't have an active garden growing in those seasons.
Gotcha.
Which would be a nice
Be nice to just have some downtime.
Yeah, a little downtime, but you could still think about gardening. You could read about it. You could take online courses, listen to more podcasts. There's no shortage of things you can do to improve your skill and raise the bar.
That's right.
And that's what I would like more time to do. No one that can't, if you can't garden physically in the fall like that, you certainly have many, many, many other opportunities to be a better gardener.
You can grow your skills.
Yes.
If you can't grow your plants, you can grow your skills.
That's what I was trying to say.
Can you give us kind of a big picture overview of some things we can do in the fall and winter if we can't grow crops?
Yeah.
And even if we can. So, for example, in the spring and summer, I've got my whole garden full. In the fall, I don't plant my entire garden, and instead I'm preparing some of the other areas. Can you give us some big picture overview of kind of what that might look like, practical steps for planning and preparing for the next growing season? Absolutely.
A lot of times if you've been at it a while, you can get in a rut because you can just, you can keep planting what you found success with in like even the same varieties. And we don't venture out from our comfort zone. And I encourage everyone to try new things every year so that you can discover new things and you don't get in a rut and you don't get bored with what you've been doing. And you can expand your strengths through those challenges. So be making your list and read those seed catalogs and look what's out there. Even if it's just a change in a variety, maybe it's something that matures more quickly, like broccoli varieties. Sometimes, we don't have 75 days for it to head up before it's too cold. But if we could grow broccoli that grows in 55 days, that's 20 days sooner. And that can make all the difference in the world. But that stuff just doesn't drop in our lap. We have to be looking and researching that. So learning that, how did your garden do? What went well, what didn't, and why? And then what are those things you want to change? So you do that SWOT analysis or whatever it's called. And strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and
threats.
Thank you. And apply that to your garden. So maybe your garden wasn't as productive. Well, how was your soil? Did you compost? Did you buy compost? Did you make compost? Could you make more compost? Things like that. And doing that SWOT analysis right there can build out a long to-do list of things that you can be doing ahead of the physical action of gardening to make your experience the next year different enough and new enough that you can't wait to get out there.
I think that to-do list is key. You can definitely stay busy enough through those off-season months if you want to, if that's off-season for you, building and preparing and, enlarging and trying different things. You'd mentioned seed catalog, and I kind of laughed when you said that. I used to look forward to like the Sears catalog with toys and the different things, and now I look forward to my seed catalogs, and I just look at my wife's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm looking at the seeds." I mean, are there that many kinds? I'm like, "Oh yes, there are."
And there's a lot of good, some of the companies do a great job with their catalogs in providing information. You can learn a lot by reading the catalog.
It's learning opportunity. Sure.
Very relevant information. Yes.
And one of the things that I love that, trying something different every year. One of the things I tried differently this year, and I'm going to continue with it, but I'm going to do a little different environment for them, is I tried the dwarf tomato.
Yeah.
You've had some people on the show that talked about that sort of thing. And I've tried some of those varieties this year, and it was kind of hit and miss. I planted them in pots. And so next year, I'm going to not plant them in pots. I'm going to plant them in either the ground or a raised bed. And I'm going to, I'm not giving up on it because they didn't do exactly what I wanted them to do last year. Hey, it might have been something to do with the pot that I planted it in. And so,
well, I want to ask you, what do you think was the issue with the pot rather than just something with the pot? Why do you think it didn't do as well? What were those symptoms?
Well, and I'll tell you probably what it is human error. It usually is, isn't it? But here's the thing: I have a preset irrigation system. and it waters all my raised beds,
Mhm.
and it waters all of my in-ground garden. It does not water my pots. And so it takes me remembering to go out there and water. And I'm in the garden usually, but I'm not always thinking, what can I garden or what
Fair
can I
enough.
water, and that
Yeah.
sort of thing. I think maybe that's part of it, but I'm thinking, all right, well, if I put them in the raised bed, I don't have to think about it. And
Yeah.
or either I can increase my irrigation to include those as well.
There you go. You know what it probably was, and you're right. What I'm hearing you say is exactly what you said, and that when they're in pots or grow bags, they need more water than anything in your raised beds because they drain much faster. They don't hold water nearly as well. So I'm 100% sure that was the issue, but that's okay. If you can't get to that spot or you don't think about it as much, absolutely. You either need to make something that pops up on your phone to remind you to get out there or
Uh-huh.
move them into your garden. But just having this exercise of walking through that and thinking about what that may be, now you know, and you can act accordingly.
That's right. I love, I probably grow a dozen different varieties of tomatoes every year. Those are just one of my favorite things. That's what my granddaddy grew. He grew a little bit of everything, but he really grew a lot of tomatoes, and so I paid attention to the tomatoes, and so lots of different varieties act a lot of different ways in a lot of different environments.
Mhm.
Through trial and error, through that scientific process, you learn a lot. And I love that exercise we walked through. I think that's helpful for people to see an example of exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. And when you've done it a few years, even from year to year, I've never seen 2 years the same.
Mm.
Every year is different. And just when you think you got it figured out, you don't, because Mother Nature reminds you of that. But I think what it helps us do is manage the variances so that we don't panic in
Mhm.
that year where it's not working out like it's supposed to. And we maybe have paid attention to the fact that maybe it ends up working itself out, but it goes through some stresses along the way, but it doesn't mean that it's the end of the plan or the season. I've learned that time and time again through
Mhm.
just writing it out and practicing what we know to do and then letting Mother Nature be involved to see how that plays out. So good for you. I mean, I think tomatoes are one of the most rewarding and frustrating things we can possibly grow.
I love that.
It's worth it, but it's the biggest challenge
It is.
I have of anything I grow throughout the year.
Same. I take pictures of my garden and I'll put it up and they'll say, "Oh, I wish I could garden like that." I'm like, "Oh, you can." Matter of fact, I've got a guy, uh, and he's sitting here with me today. You love new gardeners, and I've heard you express that before. People who have not gardened in the past, getting into gardening, and I'm the same way. I love seeing that. If I've got some listeners and they're interested in starting a garden, they've never gardened before, either they want to just eat healthy, fresh food, or just really they resonate with what we've been talking about. What would be some small steps that you'd recommend that they start taking today to think about planning that garden?
I would first have them make sure they have the answer to their why. I mean, why do they want to do it? What's their motivator? What's their driver? What's gonna keep them going when it gets hot and when the bugs show up and the diseases hit your plants? Do you throw in the towel because your why, you don't know your why, or your why isn't important enough for you to keep going? Because if that's okay. I mean, we're not all as passionate as you and I, and whatever. But I think that's important for you to know ahead of time. So when you do hit the bumps and the waves, you have a reason. You have your North Star. You have your reason to keep going. I think that's very important. And then what's the reward? I mean, for us, we love the whole experience. We like getting our hands in the soil. We like the nurturing, the seed starting, the seedlings, the whole thing from start to finish. But some people may get there. Some people may find that right off the bat. But there's something else, and that would be, what do you like to grow? What do you like to eat? Is it flowers? Is it vegetables? Is it ornamentals? Is it, what is that thing or those things? And that's what I want you to learn how to grow first, because you like those things, and maybe you've never experienced that under your own hands, or growing something that you can eat that you started. There's no comparison in
Uh,
taste to what you grew at home versus what you buy at the grocery store. Nothing,
Absolutely.
no comparison.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's also an extra motivator. I've talked to people who, like, oh, I started growing tomatoes. I'm like, okay, I love tomatoes. I don't really care for them. Well, why did you grow them? Because then when it starts getting tough, you're like, it's okay. I don't really care for tomatoes anyway. And then you start saying, well, I don't have a green thumb. I'm not a gardener. I love that you mentioned, what do you like to eat? Start growing that first.
Yeah. And that will spur your interest into trying new challenges, because you're never going to master anything probably, but you're going to develop enough confidence to venture out, you know?
And it's this concept of never stop learning too. Anybody can be a planter. You go to the box store, you buy your 6-pack of plants, and you put it in the ground and you water it every now and then. When you think about it, you can be a planter. But to me, that's different, because it's, if that works out, it's fine. If it doesn't, then oh well. But if we're always learning, and if we're always curious, I think that's a big word for me when it comes to gardening, right? If we're always curious, then we're always going to, that adds to the reward of everything.
I think that's the key word. I think curious is the driving force behind those that keep going and want to learn more versus those that are just the planter. And you and I know plenty of people that go to the box store, they buy the 6-pack, they stick it in the ground, and it's an afterthought from then on. And stuff dies because they didn't even think about it, or they didn't want to get up in the middle of the day and go water it, or whatever it is. There wasn't anything that motivated them to go take care of it. And of course, the results are going to be less than satisfactory when that happens. So I am thankful that I and you and many others have that curiosity to experience the depth and the levels and the heights that we can get to from what gardening has to offer, that so many people miss because they never get to that point. They never even get to the next layer. They don't peel that one more layer of onion to realize, oh my gosh, this is where the magic happens.
Yep.
They give up too soon.
A lot of times it's just one peel away, right?
Yeah.
Well, Joe, this has been fantastic. This is something I've been looking forward to, just being able to pick your brain for a little while. Thank you for letting us do that. And I'd love to for you to be able to share how my listeners can find out more information about you. You're doing fantastic work in the world and in gardening in particular. You've got a lot of free resources out there too. So can you tell us where to find some of those?
I think the single best starting place is joegardner.com. And on the homepage or within an interior page or two of the website, you're going to get to a lot of links that take you to other places, whether it's the YouTube channel or the Online Gardening Academy or the podcast or the free downloadable resources, or, on and on and on. Because although this is my life's passion, it's also my profession. And I'm thankful that I've been able to make a good living at gardening. And, there's some paid resources there too, but most of the stuff we offer there is just out there for the taking.
Yeah. And that's that's what I love about what you're doing too, is, I will attest, I've taken several of Joe's paid classes, the courses, and they are phenomenal. So you guys check those out, but there's all kinds of free resources available that Joe puts out there for people that are just, wanting to learn. You're inspiring curiosity in gardeners all over this world.
I hope so. Yeah. If that's all I ever did, job done. That inspiring curiosity so that we can grow new gardeners is really my main mission.
Love it. Thanks, my friend. Appreciate you. Appreciate you being here. And you guys go check out Joe Gardner.
Thanks, Chad. I really appreciate you having me. It was fun.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to the RevRx podcast. We hope you enjoyed what you heard today, and if so, we'd love it if you would hit that subscribe button so that you'll never miss a new episode from us. Also, feel free to leave us reviews and comments, as we'd love to hear from you. Be blessed and be the very best you.